Hello and welcome back to the AI Ethics Now podcast. My name is Tom Ritchie and I'm really pleased today to be joined by Daniella Latham. Hi Daniella, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me here, Tom.
Thanks Daniella. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about your current role and what brings you to this discussion around AI, please.
So I work in product marketing. I'm currently working at a large software technology company called Atlassian, which builds software tools for knowledge workers and products like Jira and Confluence. And my current role is focused on helping build and launch functionality that's built with AI for different types of workers and users of the software. And my focus right now is more on how business applications of AI and how AI technology is transforming that world.
Fantastic. It sounds like a really interesting job and a really interesting role. And I imagine that you're really busy with the explosion of interest in AI that we've seen over the past few years. I wonder, seeing as you come at AI from the perspective of a business, I wonder if you wouldn't mind outlining the key characteristics that you think make up a successful AI entrepreneur or innovator, please.
Yeah, so I think there's two answers to that. So my context right now is knowledge workers. So I'm helping understand how businesses, especially larger businesses, how they're going about adopting AI technology at scale for their employees and how they can leverage those applications. So some of the interesting areas for that is we're seeing there's no playbook for this. So we're seeing challenges in knowledge workers understanding, practical applications, how AI can be used in their day-to-day roles. It's a completely new way of working. That's not just things like prompt engineering, it's things like how they're leveraging data, for example, how they're leveraging functionality like RAG. And it's interesting to see that and see a lot of companies build out AI task force and how they are asking the right questions and making their investments. And then thinking about the perspective of AI entrepreneurs. I've spoken to quite a lot of people that are working in the space building AI focused startups. I don't think the characteristics are any different of any other type of entrepreneur. I think it's still the same. It's just applying a different type of technology. So I've seen, entrepreneurs that I talk to are still obsessed with product market fit. They're obsessed with understanding, solving problems. But for them, what's different is really the problems are evolving and it's really knowing the current limitations and understanding how can you evolve and develop quickly, but also understand the guardrails in place to ensure a good user experience and ensure an ethical user experience as well.
I wonder if, as part of those discussions, you've heard people talking about, you mentioned guardrails. Are there questions about kind of ethical considerations for AI entrepreneurs and innovators? Because obviously AI as a tool is different to some other technologies and it comes with a lot of ethical challenges. I wonder if that's come up in your discussions.
Yeah, it happens all the time, and I hear this a lot at work. I think AI has got a bit of a branding challenge right now. We hear a lot about negative stories around AI. It's hard to find those good stories and celebrate the actual benefits and the human stories behind it. We just hear a lot of, you know, catastrophizing around AI taking jobs, ruining humanity, taking over, that sort of thing, like very, very large scale. But we rarely hear a lot in the media around great stories. Some of the examples being child skulls from Pompeii being able to be read for the first time because of AI. I know just in the last few months, they've been able to scan some geoglyph artifacts in Peru in just 6 months with the help of AI versus years and years and years. So it's interesting to see that, AI is helping not just science and technology, but it's also benefiting culture and history. So these sorts of fields we wouldn't necessarily associate directly with AI. And I think, there's challenges around guardrails, but I think a lot of that is around the negative brand perception. And it would be great to hear more of those stories. So I think anyone who's thinking about working on AI should do their research and understand what are the benefits here, but how can we build this with balance? Another example of this that I've seen in my work is Atlassian has responsible technology principles. It's had those for years. So that's a framework that's been put in place for the business to make sure they're building, technology in a positive, impactful way that's affecting society in a positive way. And they've had those way before the generative AI explosion. Now they just had to evolve that to incorporate AI as well and think about, okay, how can we apply this to these new technologies coming forward? So I see that as a really good step forward as well for anyone working on that to refer to like a framework and understand like key principles that are being built out as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that Atlassian have developed their current governance compared to, I think some institutions and groups I've worked with have seen kind of AI governance and responsible principles around the use of this technology. They've seen it as something that needs to be entirely separate. But I like how you're saying Atlassian have said, no, this is just an extension of what we've done previously. The principles are broadly the same. We just need to perhaps tailor it to what we're working on. I also really liked as well, you said about the kind of negative dystopian, I suppose, ideas of AI that we see a lot within the media, particularly social media. You tend to see a lot of those types of stories pop out. But also, you're right about the positive ones and linking it to history and other spaces. And I think when we're talking about innovation and AI, it feels important perhaps to separate those kind of business corporate uses of AI for those more explorative uses of AI, like using it to scan and understand glyphs from thousands of years old civilization is much less problematic than using it in terms of a data set for us today. And I like that you've drawn out that difference, and I think it's an interesting one. With that in mind, though, I wonder, do you have any reflections from how we can foster an environment that encourages this type of AI innovation?
Absolutely. I think, when things started getting explosion of generative AI like last year, there was a lot of conversation around, okay, how can we apply this? The potential is, really unlimited. There's so many applications of this. And at least from the knowledge worker perspective, there was a lot of overwhelm. Like, where do I even get started? There's this whole new concept of being able to prompt engineer, which is completely new. Something I read quite early on last year was a really great article by Professor Ethan Mollick, which I refer to everyone. It's called In Praise of Boring AI. And it really opened my eyes. It basically compared the AI revolution to the Industrial Revolution. So, how can we leverage artificial intelligence to remove or mitigate the tedious, repetitive, and mentally dangerous work in the same way that machines did the same during the Industrial Revolution? And that really got me thinking. I thought, we don't have to think about these huge, like massively big picture abstract use cases of AI. Think small and go from there. So that's what I started to think about. And something I know is a huge challenge for anyone in knowledge worker role. So whether it's any type of industry or field, and something that anyone is going to face in their career going forward is, understanding data, finding the right information you need to do your job, passing the right information, accessing the information, being able to draw conclusions and patterns from that information and data. That's a huge time suck. And I think that's where something like AI can come in and really help people become more productive. And it's not about just being productive so you can do more and more and more and make more money for your business. It's also about personal practice and growth. So the fact that you are able to query data, someone like myself, I don't have a data science background, I'm not technical. Therefore, something like using natural language search to find certain data rather than having to learn SQL as a data language, right? That's really helpful for me because then I don't have to rely on other people to get what I need. Or being able to use a functionality like RAG to find information across different tools that are being used in my organization. That's helping me get the data I need. So I don't spend time on that. I spend time on being able to upskill in my craft because I have the capacity to do so. And I think that's where, whenever I advise people like where to get started with AI, or if they're kind of unclear, I'll say start with small first. Start with the really tedious tasks, the stuff that you can automate on a day-to-day basis, the stuff you're doing a lot that's taking time out. And that's a way for people to get comfortable with using the technology and go from there. And then they can start upskilling and using it in more interesting ways and maybe leaning to prompt engineering and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the point about Ethan Mollick's work, I would recommend that to all the listeners. What you're talking about really strikes me with this idea of like critical AI literacy, the ability to know not only what these tools can do, but how to leverage them for what you're working on. I think you're a really good example of probably an early adopter of AI, but from an interdisciplinary perspective, in that you're not technical in the way that I think when you talk to people about AI and using it, they think you have to be very technical, but it's about being able to, as you say, use those tools to apply them to the context that you need them to gather the information. For me, it's about ideating. So I use AI a lot to help me develop a series of ideas that then I can go in and go, I'm not sure about that, or yep, there's some value in that, and can I combine these? And it's something we're really trying to emphasize to the students on our module is, yes, we do have computer scientists on there, but we also have linguists, we also have historians, we also have law students, and it's trying to get them to recognize that whatever field that they move into once they finish university in the future, they will need that sense of kind of critical AI literacy to understand, how do I apply these tools in a way that supports what I'm doing. And there's a really interesting set of discussions at the moment in higher education about how AI is going to ruin how we assess, it's going to ruin how we teach and how students understand and everything else. But what's perhaps the most interesting thing for me is, as a historian, is there's a real precedent for this. If you go back 30, 40 years and look at when people began to use typewriters rather than handwriting, or the personal computer, or Google when I was at university, the arguments are the same. It's the same arguments just being repackaged in a different way. So yeah, I really like the kind of interdisciplinary way that you described how you use it. It's not just about using it from a technical point of view, but understanding how to use it in the jobs that you're doing, and in your case with kind of marketing and other things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are good frameworks in place. You don't have to learn in a vacuum. So something I'd also encourage, students to look at if they're understanding how to better write prompts, is something like the RISM framework. That's RASEN. And that will tell you how to structure your prompt in the right way so that the AI can respond and provide better outputs. Something like that you can already use now. And I hear a lot from young people, students, like, how can I future-proof myself? How can I defend against AI, potentially taking future jobs? I subscribe to the idea, I don't believe in the lump of labor fallacy, where there's only a set finite amount of jobs in the world and that's it. And once they're gone, that's it. No one has jobs. We've seen, to your very point just now, how the advent of new technologies has just evolved the way people are working, or the new jobs that are coming out, the new ways of working entirely, like new playbooks for working, right? And new opportunities to evolve that. So I would also encourage, if you really want to future proof yourself, like, focus on always developing those critical soft skills. Something that's really helped me, if you're interested in marketing in particular, but again, applicable to all types of disciplines, is things like storytelling. How can you understand how to frame a narrative so you can speak persuasively, so you can pitch an idea, whether that's pitching your startup or assessing a business strategy with leadership in your company? How can you tell a story about data? So how can you look for themes and patterns in a data and say, hey, this is how this applies to this story, this narrative I'm trying to get across? That's a crucial skill you're going to need. Things like being strategic with your language, so that you're not, incepting negativity, that you're framing things positively, so people will respond positively. That's a skill everyone's still going to need. Being able to make critical decisions and trade-offs based on the resources that you have at hand. And then finally, how you approach solving problems. I think especially for someone who's really interested in entrepreneurship here, solving a problem, like, every day be thinking, what are some problems I encounter that can be solved, and how do I approach that in a measured and balanced way, or what do I prioritize first? These are all soft skills, and I use air quotes when I say that, because I they're not hard skills, they're not technical skills, but they are so crucial. And those sorts of skills, I use them every day in my life. I feel like they're applicable to everyone. So I would urge you to continue to not just learn, immerse yourself in AI, which is great, but continue to evolve those separate skills, those softer skills on the side. That's going to really help you and really develop you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, just reflecting from my own experience, it's the same. I don't use my history skills every single day, but those skills have allowed me to tell stories and to be able to have these kind of critical conversations and everything else that you've mentioned as well. And yeah, I think another really interesting thing that we've alluded to but not explicitly said with the increase in use of AI is the potential for an improvement in quality of life. So you mentioned about using it to help you save time and to be able to shortcut things when related to data in our contexts. But actually, you said something that's really struck me, which is, it's not just about using the extra time to then make more money for your company and do other things, but it can also be to actually say, look, we don't necessarily need to work smart, not work hard, I think is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, so for me, for someone like myself in product marketing, if anyone's interested in that sort of field, I now have time to do things like practice my storytelling, which is crucial to my role, and also things, extra skills like public speaking, like just getting the time to do that where it's a completely different environment, a completely different muscle, but again, so valuable for myself in building in my personal growth. And that's something I couldn't do a few years ago. Like I've really been able to spend time on that. So yes, absolutely. It's not just about doing more and more and more. It's about using your time in the right way. And then having time to just educate myself on other areas that are very useful and valuable for me as well. And being able to catch up and understand the latest news and technology and feel a bit more on top of things. Not feeling caught in the constant cycle of just try to stay up to speed on everything, that's where it's useful.
I wonder, you mentioned about the responsible technology principles that you have in your current role. And obviously they are there to help guardrail against some of the issues that can come up with using these sorts of technologies. And with that in mind, I wonder if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit more to the question of what you think are the main challenges, but also opportunities for businesses that are looking to adopt AI technology.
Yeah, so as the technology is evolving fast, there's this temptation to want to latch on to the latest technology. You might have seen recently the update from Google about creating podcasts really fast. Actually, it's called LM Notebook or something like that. So something like audio AI technologies, something evolving or something to do with videos. There's a lot of chatter around that. So there is a temptation to just be like, okay, the next big thing, what do we jump onto? We want to be first to work on this, right? But we have to strike that balance again between applying it and building it in the right way, as well as being disruptive. And I think that's particularly interesting for larger companies that want to innovate, but they're less focused on the disruption side and more about how do we do this in a measured way and make sure this is actually valuable. And then that can strike a chord as well for startups because they're all about disruption. So there's that piece of like balance between the technology evolving and doing it in a thoughtful way. There's also governance, such as who is actually going to drive this? Who's making the decisions? Is it all engineering? They're the ones that are building the technology. Are they making the decisions? Well, no, I would counter. There's lots of different people that should be at the table when we talk about governance, right? So if you're thinking of from a business perspective, you should have a task force, which I think I mentioned earlier, that should involve lots of cross-functional disciplines. So legal teams, marketing, product, engineering, design, you want to design good experiences as well. There's all sorts of people you can involve in that task force who should have a say. It shouldn't just be led by the people building the technology. So I think that's really important. And then, yeah, adhering to your responsible technology principles, however you set those out, that's crucial as well. I think companies are also thinking a lot around what's the return on investment with AI, because it's a very expensive technology. There's a lot of implications for the environment as well with these technologies. So there's a huge cost as well. So I've seen them, think about what's the impact this is actually going to have on my workforce, or what's the impact on my customers if I'm directly building technologies for them. What's the actual productivity increase? I've heard a lot. We've seen some reports from companies like Microsoft around how generative AI is making people X% more productive or X% better at doing certain things or building certain skills. There's a lot of interest around that. Like, how do we, once we get past this hype, how do we actually demonstrate the return on our investment in these technologies as well? So principles, governance, and also what do you expect out of this investment? What does good look like? What does a successful application look like? Whether that's using it internally or building something externally as well. Those are all some considerations I've explored.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really helps me reflect on what we've tried to do with this module. So if I just pick up principles, governance, and what does success look like, and what you were saying about varied teams being involved in that, that's something we've really tried to do with this module, where it's not just for computer scientists or, in your case, engineers, but we want the philosophers in the room to be like, but what does this mean for us as humans? What does success mean? How do we take this tool and use it as something that benefits all humanity beyond just kind of Western Anglophone AI language models that we know exist? How do we ensure that humanity as a whole can benefit from this? And what it feels to me from listening to what you've said is there is a balance to strike, and it's about the nuance within that. So yes, there are some clear challenges in relation to the climate impact, to data ethics, to issues of bias that we know exist. And as you say, there are clear opportunities, but it's how do we balance those for what's best for us, I suppose? And by us, I mean humanity in the broadest sense, not just those of us using the technology or benefiting from it. And actually, how we ensure that when we talk about AI for good, that good relates to everyone and relates to the climate and relates to creating things that are almost more utopian than dystopian by design. Having those principles linked to your values and then applying that to how you're using this technology, that would be the kind of core advice that we would want students and other listeners to take away from this. Thank you so much, Daniella. It's been really enlightening to see the perspective of businesses in terms of using AI and adopting the technology into their day-to-day work. Thank you so much, and look forward to speaking to you again in future.
Thanks so much.